Welcome back to Spilling the Tea SA. I am Bianca, your host, and today we're going to dive into a controversial matter around the Afrikaner community in South Africa. Now, the whole debate is around an open letter that was signed by 40 plus Afrikaners that included journalists, academics, clergy, business people, and the letter is titled Not in Our Name. The gist of the letter is that these Afrikaners do not want to be used as a political narrative where Afrikaners are seen as a victimized group in South Africa. And this is specifically a narrative used by the Trump administration in the US. As most of us know, Trump signed an executive order, I believe in February, around a refugee program for white Afrikaners, specifically farmers that he mentioned, and also then for other minorities in South Africa. And a number of white South Africans have gone over to the US so far. There has also been an incident where the United States booked 50 seats on commercial flights and only 3 South Africans turned up to catch their flights to the US. Now, when this letter was published in late October, it was first published in Netwerk 24, Afrikaans media, and then in News 24. And it has had quite a bit of backlash, but from a very specific group. So it is mainly from the groups that are minority rights groups, I think. That's what they call themselves. For instance, there was Lex Libertas, that is headed up by Aaron Strutz, that initially was at AfriForum, then for a brief period he was at Solidarity, and then he started Lex Libertas. He indicated that these Afrikaners were useful idiots to the government, and that the government actually pushed this letter. In other words, removing their agency totally, and saying that they did not do this on their own. This was a state operation. And this has generally been the take from the Solidarity movement and also AfriForum's Kali Kriel, who also said that this was a state security project. Sounds very false flag apartheid kind of thing, Kali. But today I am going to be speaking to one of the original signatories, the legendary journalist, Ruda Landman. So grab your tea and let's dive in. Welcome, Ruda. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Ruda, I know who you are, and I'm sure many South Africans do, but for those that may not know who you are, can you give us a little bit of a background?
And thank you for the invitation. I worked as a journalist for most of my life, and most South Africans may, if they know me probably from Carte Blanche, where I was one of the co-anchors since inception in 1988 until 2007. And after that, I've been doing various bits of television work on and off screen. And my proudest project at the moment is that I write soft skills for students. We have with partners, of course, with sponsors. One doesn't do this on your own. I have 3 booklets out there that go to all the universities for the first years and for the senior students, 2 different ones. And we now have one that goes to some of the schools. And it's about time management, stress management, study methods, and then the seniors, how to apply for a job. And I write a weekly newsletter, which goes with that, which gives me great satisfaction.
Is because you were one of the original signatories in that letter that hit Netwerk 24 first and then News 24. And it was seen as very controversial by some people, and others were so glad to hear from a group of Afrikaners on how they feel about a particular situation when it comes to politics and the Afrikaner identity. I want to ask you, what was the main reason that you got involved or that you decided to sign your name to that?
I was just furious that people were talking such nonsense and purporting to be doing it in the name of the group of people as a part of which I grew up. We are Afrikaans in our roots, in our marrow. And now you go out there and you insult our country in our name? I needed to say no. No, no, no. We are not all like that. Ons is nie almal so nie. Leave me alone. It's you definitely not speaking for me.
So it was your passion and your anger at that stage. If I can ask you, so you were upset about what was happening, and I think there have been a number of voices, lone voices, that have been trying to address the disinformation about Afrikaners, but also linked to South Africa. But if I look at it, do you think that it will have an impact, or what do you think the desired impact of this particular letter would be, the not in our name letter?
I don't know what will happen in America, which is where this originated really, and it was in response to President Trump's idea of giving special permission to Afrikaners as refugees above, or really to the exclusion of almost everyone else. So it started as a response to something that happened in America. But I don't know whether that, President Trump is nothing if not unpredictable. So one simply don't know what he will do tomorrow. But I hope that both in America, but especially in South Africa, people will realize that Afrikaners are, if we're diverse, there are so many beautiful parts of this, into this our very language arose from so many different roots, and that's why it's so colorful and beautiful and adaptive. If people can only say, my husband is a political analyst, and he often says that if you can't live with if you can't live with clashing truths, if you can't hold two opposing truths in your head at the same time, do not live in South Africa. We are a nation of contradictions. And to put all Afrikaners in one box and say this is who they are, doesn't work. And I want to say to our fellow South Africans, please do not do that we all agree with this, because I really feel that the people who are putting up signs next to the highways now for the G20, etc., they're insulting my country. And please, my fellow South Africans, do not think that all of us who speak this beautiful language agree with that. It is so not true.
I struggle. One of the things in my capacity, in my own circle, is having these discussions with people that look like me, white people, and I'm an English speaker. So, but we do not feel that they need to get involved in this conversation. Okay. And for me, the issue is if we do not get involved, if we do not actually say not in our name, what we are doing is just allowing others to tell our story. And I don't think others have the right to tell our story, because that's not who we are as South Africans. I wanted to ask, what has the interactions been like in your personal circle, where you've actually, I saw in the letter people were approached, so I assume that, signatories probably approached their circle, but we've all had personal interactions where we are sometimes surprised by how people respond. So if you don't mind sharing.
One tends to socialize with people who see the world the way you do. I'm afraid that just is the truth. There are people who are really close to me, also some younger people that I really love, who are on the other side in this debate. And I have said to, and the farms is one issue which is such a button that just immediately respond to that. And I say to them, I have no argument with the fact that crime in South Africa is absolutely horrendous and that people living on farms must be living in fear daily because they are such soft targets. One family far from any help, from any support. It must be really, really difficult. But where I disagree is when people put the frame of group around that and say that crime is aimed at white Afrikaans people specifically. It's just not true. The people in Manenberg, the people in Westbury are as fearful from day to day in their circumstances. Crime in South Africa affects everyone. And to say that white and in white Afrikaans people are specifically targeted is just, no, it's just not correct. So, one tries to not get emotional and just say that I see the same problem, but I do not put the same framing around it.
This term Afrikaner gets thrown around a lot, and it is, it's our language and it's our culture that we're protecting. I personally feel that when you are protecting something, you do not isolate it. Ask as an English speaker, but if you had to define what Afrikaans means just to you, Ruda, you being an Afrikaner woman.
Well, of course, it has a lot of history. I have two grandparents who were farmers in the Northern Cape, and I had to learn English. We did not speak it at all. This is hard won. So in the first place, there is, as I said, the language. And we go to some Afrikaans festivals and absolutely love that. The theatre is so vibrant, and the discussions that are happening, and Antjie Krog's latest book and so forth. I mean, all of that. There's a whole that I feel completely home in. But then I also know that my language is shared by people who live in a completely different cultural background, and that's one reason. I absolutely love Johannesburg, where I live. But when I hear people speaking Kaaps, it just there's cannot even approach. We're far too formal and too neat. So there's so many variations. But to get back to Afrikaner, that term has acquired a kind of political charge, which I don't like. So for 2 decades already, I prefer to call myself an Afrikaans South African, not an Afrikaner.
Okay. You're right when it comes to, but it has been monopolized by a certain group, and it's the groups that have the largest microphones in South Africa, unfortunately. There is something that I wanted to ask you is, if we go beyond the politics, okay, what do you think is the biggest misconception about Afrikaners today, and something that you would like to correct? You already said we're not all the same, but there are other misconceptions because of the push to make it a homogeneous group.
We do not all belong in the same box. Ideologically, the difference between, say, John Vorster and Beyers Naudé in a previous generation.
Yes.
And I could name similar, but I would get into it with the present generation. There's every possible political stripe in being Afrikaans. And that's the one thing. And the other, what we look like from the outside. But I want to say that this country is, someone said the other day, and it's actually a direct translation, I love this place. Ons is lief vir die plek. This is our place. This is where we are. It's we didn't ever have, you know, why are English people called soties? You know that? You know the answer?
I know why.
We never had one foot in a different place.
Yeah.
This is our place. This is where we belong. This is where we are happy. This is where we want to build. And for me, that is the most important thing, that we have skills, and because we, for whatever reason, are of the privileged section of South African society, and we have so much to offer. So let's stop trying to define who we are. And, you know, a Canadian friend of mine said to his new South African wife at one point, "Love, if you keep staring up your ass, all you'll see is shit." Can we stop just, you know, going round and round and round the same silly stuff and just help to build this country? That's what we want to do.
Absolutely. And I want to say, when it comes to building the country, because of what is happening right now, okay, so we've got the boycott, and that is currently being used as, you know, it's because of what's happened to Afrikaners. That is the reason that we're getting from the USA. How do you think we can turn that around? Do you think should we be speaking out? What can we do? Not?
No, as I said, Donald Trump is not predictable, and he is not one can't. How does one influence him? He plays golf with half a dozen conservative South Africans, apparently, and they have his ear for hours at a time.
Yeah.
And it's not just South Africa. They're also not going to COP30. So, you know, we notice their response to us, but it's not just us. I mean, we came down on India because they bought oil from Russia.
Yes.
It's kind of equal opportunity nastiness.
If we have to just ignore the current situation with the US, which I know is being placed front and center, is I think that now would be a great opportunity and something we shouldn't miss in trying to turn around the dialogue in South Africa. You know, then we can have people on the wall holding the line when we have this push from the outside, whatever the misses are. So that is what I'm getting to at this stage. I don't think anyone's going to convince the US administration of anything. But what do you think would be possibly a practical idea on what we can do to just turn this around inside for us so that we don't get used this way?
Let's have another Springbok team. You know, I think Gracie and Sia and the boys do more for us than we will ever be able to repay. And the more that kind of thing happens, which focuses all our attention on the positive, on building. You know, these young people for whom I write my booklets and my newsletter, we've just had a quiz, and so just to get some feedback. They're amazing. They are so idealistic. They are so, I want to make a difference in the world. If we can just all focus our energy on building, on helping them to build the next generation, you know, will be what they are. You know, you do you, and we focus on what we can do. So, you know, Anton said, when someone said to him, "You are any currency. Why do you live in South Africa?" And he said, "Here my life makes a difference." Yeah, that is true for every one of us who has been privileged enough to get a good education and to be financially, economically in a place where you can actually make a difference.
Yes.
Your life will make a difference, because so much in South Africa still has to be done. We're not done like Norway. We need to and get there. So there's so much to be done.
I have seen the hot takes, and that is something I really want to check. And I think it's important everyone understands that. I've seen the hot takes, and the personal attacks. But that aside, I think the people that signed the letter, they knew what was coming. But I also have seen an entire campaign run to indicate that this was a government operation and that the signatories were being, well, it has been framed as from being malicious and working with the evil ANC government right through to being useful idiots. In fact, there have been videos naming oh yes, I actually saw your picture on one of
I'm glad to be called useful.
Focus on the positive. Let's focus on the positive. I personally know that's not the case. This was not a case of a government push. But I need to ask from someone, I could be wrong. I have to ask you, who is the original signatory? Was the government behind this?
Well, the short answer is no. Piet Kroukamp had the idea first. He spoke to Max de Pre. They, with I think one or two other people, they drew up a draft. Someone who works at DIRCO, not the boss by any means, was one of the people who helped to find more signatories and send it around, etc. But if she really wanted, if it was really a government operation, would she have used her DIRCO email address? Surely not. No one's that stupid. So, I think it's a pity, because it is an easy weapon to use against us. But that is the simple truth. She was involved on the kind of inside of it, but it was not originated in DIRCO. I didn't know anything about that before I signed. So, yeah.
I also saw her email to others that was leaked by so-called informants, which is such a strange thing for me, because what world are we living in? You send out an email to get signatures and there's informants in your group. That she clearly indicated who she is, where she is, even her background, and then said she's doing it in her personal capacity as a Afrikaans woman. So I saw that and I thought, when the story about this was a secret op came out, a national security agency op. Okay.
No, and I also just want to say, it's really insulting to say to me that I didn't really think this through. I just signed something for what? Why would I do that if I didn't really believe in the content, wherever it came from? Point is, I signed this letter because I agree with every word in it. And I think that is true. Not I think, I know. That is true of every one of us. And since then, there have been hundreds more that have signed the letter.
Yes, so, I have seen that there have been a number of people that have signed it. And I saw that there was a petition out there that other people can see it. And I think that is important, is the way that this was handled. First, the 40 plus signatories, then moving on to opening it up to everyone that can see it, read it, and decide if they actually support the sentiments. Another false perception is that the letter doesn't address the issues we have in South Africa, which, if you read the letter, that's not the case. Clearly indicates. I think the difference is that those issues are highlighted as a shared struggle. It is not a thing of just one little group. And that is very important. But Ruda, I want to say thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Thank you for your insights. And yes, we onwards and upwards, I guess. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.